Welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental issues of our world. Plastic carryout bags have only been in common use since the 1970s, but now the U.S. goes through over 100 billion plastic shopping bags annually. Here to talk about why this is a problem and what we can do about it is Noelle Bowman of the Washtenaw County Public Works Division. Noelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Barb. It's really great to be here.
So let's start out with a little clarification. We're talking about carryout bags, not the garbage bags, bread bags, produce bags.
Correct. Yep, it's the bags that you put your groceries in at the time of checkout at most stores.
Okay. And we'd like to focus on plastic bags today because there's just so much to go through, but we can't be remiss and not talk about briefly paper bags because they're not without any environmental impact.
Exactly. So oftentimes people will think that paper bags are a better alternative, a more environmentally friendly alternative to plastic bags, but in fact the manufacturing process of paper bags is it requires a lot more energy to make one paper bag versus one plastic bag. And then they're also heavier than plastic bags, which makes them more expensive to transport. So
expensive and probably use more fuel and cause more carbon emissions.
That is exactly right.
Yeah. And I suppose there's not as many alternatives for things like bread bags and produce bags and garbage bags, whereas for paper and plastic shopping bags, we have cloth bags.
Exactly, yes.
Some kind of durable plastic bag.
Yes, there's lots of different varieties out there on the market these days.
All right, so we're also going to talk mostly about problems close to home, but let's just not forget that this is a global problem. So can you just touch on what some of the issues are globally?
Yeah, absolutely. So you had mentioned a minute ago that in the United States, 100 billion of these are generated per year. If we look globally, we're looking at closer to like 1 trillion bags per year globally. So needless to say, that's an enormous amount of bags being generated with only 7 billion people on Earth. So,
yeah, I saw online there was this ticker tape of real time how many bags were being used as we're looking at the screen, and it was overwhelming. It was going like this, the numbers.
Yep.
It's just amazing.
Exactly.
I think I figured out that in the space of this interview, it would be about 144 million bags by the time we end the show that were being tossed out.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So some of the reasons why we don't want to waste plastic bags is they're produced from oil, right?
Correct.
And that's not a renewable resource.
That's exactly right. With that 100 billion bag consumption rate here in this country, and a non-renewable resource, that's just not sustainable behavior. So 100 years from now, we're not going to have the means to consume at such a high rate. So,
and we've got issues with marine life.
That's exactly correct. Especially on the coastal areas of the country and world, plastic bags tend to migrate to the waterways, where of course the wildlife living in those waterways are affected. They think it's food, they'll swallow it, which is not healthy. Sometimes animals get twisted and tied in it depending on what the plastic is. So yes, it's been very detrimental to marine wildlife across the globe.
And when you say it migrates, I'm thinking maybe because of the watershed, the stuff comes down with the rivers to the ocean.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And do we notice that around here at all?
So we're sort of inland. We do have the Huron River, and I think all of us here in Washtenaw County have seen plastic bags in nature, but since we're not on a coast, we have not seen the extent of plastic bag contamination compared to those coastal communities. The main issue with plastic bags here is their damages that they cause to the recycling process.
Oh. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, exactly. So oftentimes people will put their plastic bags in with their other recyclables in the recycle bin, and then when those bags arrive at the recycling facilities, since the facilities are not designed to process that material, the bags end up getting jammed in the machinery. The machinery ends up breaking, and the facilities have to pay to fix these breakages. It's just makes for a very inefficient process when these bags are in the stream.
Yeah, you invited me out to the Western Washtenaw Recycling Authority a few years ago, and you showed me these huge machines, these big wheels that process the materials, and they were all clogged up with this stuff.
Yep.
I mean, just tons and tons. And they have to shut down everything and cut them out.
That's
and one
exactly
of the
right.
staff members had sliced his leg
Yep.
and had to go to the hospital. I mean,
Yeah, you're exactly right. That equipment at the recycling facilities is not designed to need to be shut down every day to cut materials out of it. And then on top of that, after the plastic bag materials are removed from the recycling machinery, it's so mangled, dirty, wet, and contaminated that the recycling facilities are forced to pay to send it to the landfill because it's not in good enough quality to actually recycle. So
so people throwing it into the recycling is kind of like wishful recycling. I've heard that phrase.
that's exactly right.
They're hoping that it'll get recycled, but actually it's causing taxpayer money
Yep.
to deal with it.
That's exactly right. So for the publicly owned and operated recycling facilities, the money that is used to manage the waste at the facilities, that's all taxpayer money. So we're paying for it. So it would behoove us to have more efficient processes for recycling that plastic bags does not promote. So
It's funny because everybody is talking about the free plastic bags, but it's kind of like there's no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, these bags are costing taxpayers. And also, I was thinking recently about how in the grocery stores, the price to the stores must be embedded in the price of the products.
Yep, that is exactly right. So just because you don't see the cost when you're checking out, you still are paying for it.
The aesthetic value, I was reading about in South Africa, they kind of jokingly call it plastic bags their national flower because they see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And it can degrade property values greatly.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we're having to pay people or volunteers to go out there and clean up litter.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So in terms of what can be done about it, there's fees and bans. Do you
Yes.
want to talk about those?
Yeah, so across the country and the world, there's two main types of ordinances that are adopted to address this plastic bag issue. The ban, which is generally a community will make it not allowed for retailers to distribute the bags.
Okay.
And then they oftentimes will charge a fee for the paper bag. And then there are other communities that choose to still allow for their customers to take both types of bags, but they charge an equal price for both. And now both the ban and the fee strategies, I mean, basically what those are is it's incentives for people to curb their behavior so that we can stop this massive consumption from continuing to grow. So.
And about a year ago, wasn't it, Washtenaw County Commissioners passed an ordinance, and what was that?
Yeah, so last year, actually it was about 1 year ago, I think it was June 1st, 2016, Washtenaw County was the first county in the state of Michigan to pass a bag ordinance, and we did go with the fee schedule. So 10 cents for a plastic bag, 10 cents for a paper bag. That still gives the consumer the choice to take whatever bag they want, but they're paying for the cost of that bag up front versus it being hidden in the back end at the recycling facilities.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard that there's kind of a sweet spot in terms of the fee. Like when we were traveling in Ireland, and they said that they started out more like 10 cents, the equivalent, and they gradually raised it to more like 25 cents because 10 cents wasn't really doing it, you know?
Yeah,
and
absolutely. So various communities choose different fees, and it really is it's specific to that community. And for communities that have raised that price, the reasoning behind that is just to give people more incentive to change their behavior, to try and solve this problem. So in the United States, for example, we have with the fee communities, generally 5 cents, and the maximum we have here is 10 cents. And there are some communities that have graduated from 5 to 10 cents.
But in Michigan, there was a law passed on the state level saying we can't have local ordinances.
Yep, that is exactly correct. So last year there was a Senate bill introduced, Senate Bill 853, which is a state preemption law, which means that the state says that local communities cannot pass and implement these types of bag ordinances. So what that means is that ordinance that Washtenaw County adopted last year, we aren't able to actually implement it. It's not ever going to be effective because there's a state law now that says that locals aren't able to pass ordinances to address it. So.
But potentially someday a state law could be,
Yeah.
or even a national law like they do have in a lot of countries.
Exactly. So.
Are there any states in the U.S.?
Yeah, so there is. So there is actually the very first statewide bag ordinance that passed this past election, and it was California. They're traditionally a leader when it comes to these types of efforts. But basically, they did the 10-cent fee. So they charge the entire state of California. Retailers are required to charge at least 10 cents for paper and plastic bags. If a store wants to make that higher than 10 cents, they are able to do that, but it has to be a minimum of 10 cents. And so that's that sort of, what did you call it?
Spot?
Sweet spot for what California has decided is going to be the most effective for their state.
Time will tell, because some places it just doesn't, people just absorb 10 cents and continue buying 10 bags at a time or whatever.
True.
And
Yeah.
because, you know, an extra dollar here or there sometimes doesn't make a difference. But
Yeah, you're exactly right. The communities that do pass the 10-cent fees, though, the higher the fee, the more impact we're seeing on consumption reduction. So.
And you said that Hawaii, all the counties passed it, so essentially it's a state ban even though it's municipal?
It's sort of a de facto statewide ban because there's only 4 counties in Hawaii.
And then some places choose to ban thin plastic bags, but we were in Austin, Texas a while back, and I found out that they had it had backfired because then the stores were starting to give out really thick plastic bags, and those were clogging the recycling machinery.
So people are problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, if there's a law that puts a thickness threshold on their bags, what are companies going to do in response to that? Try and find a way around it, find a loophole. So that's exactly what happened there.
Well, some people say that we just need to recycle more, and we still always can do that. Now, what are the drawbacks to relying totally on recycling?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I mentioned that it's challenging for people because you're not able to put that plastic bag material in your curbside cart. So the only access that people have for recycling this material is through drop-off.
Okay.
Thankfully, a lot of the grocery stores, the large retailers, do have collection spots for the bags. But research has shown that of all of the plastic bags that are generated, a maximum of 10% of those bags are actually dropped off for recycling. So there's still the 90% that's out there not being recycled or being improperly recycled. So.
And about a year ago, I did a radio show that aired on WMU about this topic, and I interviewed salespeople from Trex Plastic Lumber, and they were saying that they rely heavily on other sources of plastic, such as shrink wrap in business, like warehouses.
Yeah, so like boat shrink wrap, pallet shrink wrap.
Yep.
That's the same material as the thin single-use plastic bags, but it's thicker, cleaner, and better quality. And so when you recycle that material, it's going to yield a higher quality product.
And the volume's got to be really big.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these bags, the single-use plastic bags, I mean, we've all used them. They tear, they break.
Yeah.
They're intended for a single use. So those aren't good quality. So I think Trex uses that single-use plastic bag for about, what, a third or less of their feedstock. So.
And I got pretty much the same kind of thing from the companies that make recycled plastic bags, that they only rely on people bringing in their shopping bags for a very small portion of that.
Yep.
And
the same idea applies there. It's just thin and not, the low quality makes it such that it's not going to be recycled into a quality material.
Yeah. All right, well, we are about out of time, so I'd like to talk about resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mentioned that radio show. We had put a lot of resources at the end of the page on the webpage on WMU. So if people were to Google Green Room and plastic bags, that show will come up and they can click on that and then they'll see the resources at the end of the page. And that's interesting because there's the plastic manufacturers, all kinds of, so it's a broad spectrum of perspectives there.
Absolutely, yep.
And then you have the recycle.ewashtenaw.org.
Correct, yep. There's a link on our website that's dedicated entirely to the plastic bag efforts here in Washtenaw County. So it sort of explains the extent of the problem and how we attempted to solve it. And some resources for residents.
If they go to that webpage, they look at the bottom, there's a link that says plastic carryout bags.
Yep,
and they
that's the
click
one.
on that and they get a whole new page full of great resources.
Exactly.
And then you mentioned where they can find places to drop off.
Yeah, so there's a really great website called plasticfilmrecycling.org. And what that does is it tells people where the closest drop-off location is for the plastic bag. So if it's the Meijer around the corner or, you know, the CVS a couple blocks away, people will be able to drop that off wherever they're going.
So if people use cloth bags, if they're getting plastic bags, reuse them, and if they can't reuse them, if they recycle them, even if we don't have laws, we should come out ahead if everyone did that.
Yeah,
that's the big if.
Yep. That's our hope, though. I mean, all we can do is provide resources, encourage, you know, spread the word, and hope people, you know, make the right choices for themselves and the community. So.
Well, thanks for all you're doing on this. It's really great.
Thank you for having me.
For an online archive of all our Green Room shows, go to ewashtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.